Hello, my name is Professor Clement, and I am a very, very good professor. You know, I decided to start the school because we are so captivated by the spirit of this world that it's quite sickening. And I thought if I start a school and we could teach the people about divine perception so they could see. It's interesting how silly people can get. Everything I teach, every single thing, comes from this holy book called the Bible. That's right, God's holy word. And it's so fantastic to know that, no, I'm not altogether right about everything, never. But I'll tell you this one thing. I have, over the years, 32 years, mark you, I have worked and worked and worked at this, and I have pretty much got it together, I think. No, that you say, but that's deception. Well, it's bordering on it, but I am in check. I have a wife. She checks me, and she makes sure that I stay in line and online. So, being online right now, I'd like to invite you to my school. It is the School of the Prophet. And the series we're doing now is Destiny. Would you join me? Would you not want to be taught by someone as so beautiful and so well-cultured as I am? I'm sure you will. I'll see you there. Go to kimclementschool.com. Bye.
Well, I thought you'd love that. Students, good to have you with me. I even laugh at it myself because I cannot even believe that's me. Well, here we are. We are in lecture 4, and I have a very, very exciting lecture for you. We're going to speak about synchronicity and rhythm and walking in step with the Spirit. Now, you've learned a lot so far. We have so much more to learn. When you came on the Destiny series, I don't think you realize it took a lot more than just knowing what your destiny is. It's getting there. That's one of the most important things, is to actually get there. And people give up on the way because they get behind and they think they've lost step or rhythm. You have to understand that you can catch up. You can get back to that place. And I'll show you today. Have you ever been told to go with the flow? I'm sure you have before. And immediately sensed fear and excitement at the same time. That's basically what it is to walk in the Spirit. You're going to sense fear and excitement simultaneously because you're going to go with the flow. So why did you experience feelings of fear? Because flow speaks of being part of something bigger than ourselves. It's the sense of being out there alone. You got to take the chance. And I've always said there are 3 types of people in the kingdom. There's a caretaker, there's a risk taker, and there's an undertaker. And in my order, it is risk taker, caretaker, and undertaker. 3 kinds of people. The risk taker is prepared to go with the flow. The caretaker is the one that he doesn't want to do anything, and he's trying to stop people from doing it because he's poking his nose in their business. And then you have the undertaker who says, okay, I'm digging your grave for you now because this is never going to work out. So what you're going to learn today is that you have to go with the flow when you know it's the Spirit. And I'm going to say a few more things to get you to understand this. So on your way to your destiny, there's going to be fear and excitement at the same time. Have you ever had that moment with God and you've sensed fear and excitement at the exact same time? And before I go onto a platform, there's a little bit of nervousness sometimes, but I'm not talking about that. When you're in the Spirit and the Spirit of God is leading you to something, you're going to feel fear and excitement at the same time. Why? Because you're not in control, and there's a flow that takes place, and you have got to go with the flow in order for this to happen. You feel like you're alone. Okay, so flow is marked by 2 types of occurrences: synchronicity and the gift of faith. Now, we're not just talking about your measure of faith that you have on this earth to get to your destiny, but I'm talking about the gift of faith, which is a different kind of faith, a measure of faith that is beyond yours. That's what the gift of faith is. Every one of us, we have faith, but the gift of faith is a measure greater than your attained faith, because faith grows. Now that's what we're going to deal with. The gift of faith suddenly steps in. When you go with the flow, you have a gift that's going to help you. And that's very important for you to understand. that you have a gift that's going to help you go with the flow, and that is the gift of faith. It's in the gifts of the Spirit in Corinthians, where Paul speaks about it. This is what happens when you're in the flow. When I am on a platform and I'm about to prophesy, I don't know what I'm going to be saying. I only have a word of knowledge or a word of wisdom. And so what happens is I have to go with the flow. And there's this feeling of fear and excitement at the same time, because I know that now the gift of faith is going to come into action. If you want to find out about the gift of faith, look at the gifts of the Spirit in Corinthians, which I'm not going to do today. But the gift of faith goes along with synchronicity and getting you to your destiny. Very important that you understand. Let's talk about flow again for a while, and then we're going to talk about rhythm, walking in the Spirit and living in the Spirit in a few minutes. For thousands of years before Newton and before the beginning of modern science, people believed that all of nature was a single organism and that everything was connected. They believed that. Responsiveness to signs from the universe, it was completely normal, a normal part of daily life. Everything from passing clouds to passing events was perceived to speak in ways that mattered. In current times, quantum physicists encounter similar difficulties in struggling to define the basic nature of matter. They have found that the boundaries that isolate one thing from another exist only at the most obvious and superficial level. At deeper levels, all things, atoms, molecules, plants, animals, people, participate in a sensitive, dynamic web of information. It is tough to define flow. One definition is to be in a state which most often occurs during intense physical activity. We feel strong, we feel alert, and at the peak of our abilities. It means to be connected to an activity, to a moment. You know, I've often said to my team that we create moments for people. And, I even got questioned once about it. And one of them said to me, "What do you mean creating a moment?" I like the moment that I'm in when I'm on the platform under the anointing, flowing, performing and singing something that I've never ever done before, knowing that there is an order and a pattern and uniformity. Just stop right there. I need you to understand what I just said. When I'm ministering and I'm doing something that I've never done before, which is obviously prophetic, in other words, I'm ahead of time. I haven't practiced it. I haven't rehearsed it. I've picked up what is ahead of me, and now I'm performing it as best I can or saying the future. So it hasn't appeared in my present time. It's in the future. It's outside of time and space. You got it? So now what I'm doing is I am pulling that which is outside of time and space, it's ahead of me, bringing it into the now. It's inexplicable. I cannot explain it, but it is undeniably something that is happening at that moment that is real. And even though this is going on and I'm in the flow, there is an order, there is pattern, and there is uniformity. Don't forget that, because God has pattern, God has order. Now, I'm going to help you today because you need to know this as you walk your daily life. So often when people speak of flow, they're alluding to it in a larger sense. They are speaking of a connectedness to larger patterns of events. So you're connecting to a larger pattern of events and meaning. So flow is I'm using the word flow very loosely, but flow is the natural, effortless unfolding of our life in a way that moves us towards wholeness and harmony. Yes, it does. Okay, so where does flow fit into our spiritual lives? Or is there such a thing? Oh yes, there is. Flow is effortless because when we learn to swim with it, its currents move us easily, smoothly, and gently through life. Come on now, think about flowing in the water. It's not difficult unless you turn around and go against it. It's easy to flow with it. And so it means diving in and believing that everything's going to be okay. That is a faith that God loves. Okay, our stress, our struggle, and the uncertainty drops away in uniformity. Let me stick with this for a minute. We have stress, we have struggle, we have uncertainty in our life, and God has order even in your uncertainty. He has order even in your stress and your struggle. And later on, I'm going to show you how you can stay in step with the Spirit and still experience stress, struggle, because that's part of life. But what happens in a flow is the stress, the struggle, and the uncertainty, they drop away. They're still there, but they're not as important. And our joy and our peace and our satisfaction, happiness and effectiveness increase. So why am I telling you this? Because we think because there's chaos, we think because there's busyness, that God's not doing anything, so we lose our joy, we lose our peace, we lose our satisfaction, we lose our happiness. Why? Because we think that God couldn't be working in that. But this is life. God knew that there'd be kids making noise. You must come to my house and see what it's like. There are parrots screeching and making noise. There are dogs barking, running around all over the show. There's kids, there's noise, there's televisions going. And I still am aware of God's order in the whole thing. Believe it or not. You have to look away from that as if it's your enemy. It's not. Now, chaos and all these things that affect you can become an enemy if you lose your joy, if you lose your peace, if you lose your happiness. You lose your effectiveness because these things are stressing you out, thinking, well, God's not in this anymore. You're wrong. Now, you can get rid of that. You can get rid of it by saying, I rebuke this, I command it to leave. Or you can say, the stress factor is going to go down and my joy factor is going to go up because I know that God is still working. You got that? Students, you're learning something very important today. Okay, so all of this, what happens is your effectiveness increases knowing that you are in step with the Spirit, even with chaos and stress and problems, and everything seems to fall into place. Obstacles melt away, and whatever is necessary, money, time, work, people, opportunities, appear as needed. So you're going to find out that God is even in the midst of your stress. But stress must be down here and joy must be up here. That's how it must be. So, what is flow? Flow is being at the right place, the right time, for the right reason, at the right season. Flow is an unfolding because it furthers our potentiality. When you go with the flow, it brings us into life as it is meant to be lived. Okay, students, you got it? So we often have a feeling of familiarity or rightness when we're in the flow. You know, I spoke about being in your element before. Now I'm speaking about being in the flow. What is the flow that God has for you? Now, flow does not only involve our personal unfolding, but the unfolding of a larger part in which we play in God's kingdom. So we play a part in our own lives, but we play a part in the larger part, if you wish, in God's kingdom. Events and actions mesh together in a coherent pattern of deep harmony and underlying order. You're going to notice something in my teaching today. You're going to hear me saying pattern, underlying order. Write that down. Underlying order. Right there's something that I'm going to mention all the time. Even in our world, there is an underlying order. If we're walking in the Spirit, that's the key issue here. Synchronicity. I need to explain that to you in relation to destiny. So, when you're in the flow, life seems purposeful and integrated rather than chaotic and meaningless. Listen to me. You're looking at Mr. Chaos right here. Anybody that's around me say, there's all these things happening around Kim. And so we're going to speak about the integration of all these incredible things that take place and find out that it's not meaningless. There's something going on. There's an underlying order, even though things are happening. And if you can be aware of that order all the time and stay within it, you will overcome and get to your destiny. That I promise you. Now, let's talk about synchronicity, and let's try and evaluate what it means or define what it means. Synchronicity in relation to our destiny. Now, you have the secular term and what synchronicity is, and then you have the spiritual term, which I believe is what it actually means. Now, the world will always give you another idea of what God intended. So I'm going to speak about the importance of being in step with the Spirit on your journey, which is very important. You must know what season you're in to measure where you are on your journey. Where are you? Let's say I'm going to use Dallas Fort Worth, for instance, as an example. Dallas and Fort Worth. You have the Dallas Fort Worth Airport, and then Fort Worth is on one side and Dallas is on the other side. Now, you want to travel by car from Dallas to Fort Worth. Just forget about the navigational system just for a minute. Let's talk about the old signs on the road on how to get there. When you go on the way from Dallas to Fort Worth, you have a choice. There are a few highways that can get you there, and then there's the main highway. And on that main highway, it's going to tell you how many miles you are away from Fort Worth. It's very simple, and there's a certain exit you have to take so you can get into the city. These are signs to show you how near you are, how far. You think God, excuse me, do you think God is going to put you on a journey and not give you signs? And we have this old religious idea that signs, listen to me, signs are not from God. He said He doesn't want you to seek for signs to prove that He's God. That's the evil in signs. But to have signs on a journey to reveal where you are, how close you are, if you've deviated, if you've gone off course, it's vital, and He will do it. So you need to understand God's going to give you signs, and I'm going to show you that as well. Think about it and how your life can change within minutes, and you can find yourself close to you can find yourself closer to your destiny in this life by just one event taking place. I've always used this one, and I'll use it all the time, about the moment you get that phone call and you heard that you've won $70 million, and how it changes your life in 1 second. Changes the way you think, changes your posture. All of this is part of your journey to your destiny. Certain people have written in and asked me, you said, Kim, we've waited and waited and our hope has been deferred. And we find that, it's never going to happen for us. I want to tell you something, that's a lie. Because sometimes you do have to wait and wait and wait. And hope cannot be deferred if hope is kept alive. And when I say that, I mean, it's not going to, you just don't be void of hope. Remember that you're going somewhere. And then one day that suddenly moment will take place. Think about Simon Peter while he's fishing, minding his own business. 1 second, he hears the voice of Christ. His boat is filled with fish, and his whole life changes from that minute onwards. Think about Saul looking after his father's donkeys in the Old Testament, and all he had in mind was to find his father's donkeys and get them back to him. And suddenly he comes across a prophet, and the next thing, Saul is the king of Israel. Think about that for a moment. Think about Moses walking along the road, minding his own business in the desert. 40 years he'd been with the sheep and, enjoying his life, hidden away. And suddenly he sees a bush burning, and he finds himself in the middle of a prophetic word that was given to Abraham hundreds of years ago, when God spoke to Abraham and said that there was a nation that was going to come out of him, and that nation would go into oppression and into bondage. And then 400 years later, God would bring that nation out from under the hands of the oppressors and these slaves, and He would lead them out with great possessions. God gave Abraham that promise, and Moses finds himself as the one who God has chosen to bring those people out of Egypt. Think about it for a minute. He didn't dream that would be what he would do one day. Now he's standing in front of a burning bush with his shoes off, and God is saying to him, the time has come. This is the perfect divine synchronicity. You are standing on holy ground, Moses. You are standing in perfect sync with this moment that I prophesied and spoke about hundreds of years ago to Abraham. You are now in a synchronos moment. You are in time. You are the one that is going to make this come to pass. Take your shoes off. You're standing on holy ground. What is the ground that he's standing on? That ground that he's standing on is the moment in time where God is going to move into time and space and deliver the people, because He's already prophesied it, and Moses is the person. That's how important this is for you in your life. How do you know that you're not about to stand at that one moment in time that God wants to do something, and you're standing in that moment, and you could be that chosen vessel? Well, Kim, things are wrong. So were they wrong in Moses' life? Do you realize that Moses was accused of being a murderer, that he would never be allowed to go back to Egypt again, that he was a fugitive? Do you realize that he also had problems, and he was standing there, and God said, you are the one. So we're talking about signs today and synchronicity, and this may be important that we spend more time on this, because this is where the rubber meets the road as far as you and your life is concerned. Let's look at Matthew chapter 24 very quickly, and I want to show you something here. Matthew 24, verse 3 to 8. I do have a prompt in front of me to read the scriptures, because it's just easier for me to do that. So I'm speaking to you without prompting, but when it comes to scriptures, I look at them on the board here because it's easy, because I like to look at the camera and look at you when I'm reading it. But you need to go there to Matthew and chapter 24, verse 3 to 8. Very quickly, Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives. The disciples came to him privately and said, "Tell us," they said, "when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age?" Now, try and take it out and say to yourself, what will be the sign that I, Kim Clement, are coming close to my destiny, or where I'm supposed to be in life, or what I've been dreaming about, what you've shown me? How will I know? When is this going to happen? What will be the sign of the appearance of my destiny? Let's just say it like this for argument's sake right now, okay? Verse 4, Jesus answered and said, "Watch that no one deceives you. For many will come in my name, claiming I am the Christ, and will deceive many." Now he's telling them what the signs are. Guess what? They're not great signs. You will hear of wars, rumors of wars. Everybody say wars. Okay? So you saying to me, Kim, are you telling me that it could be that I'm about to meet my destiny, produce what I'm supposed to produce, when there's bad happening around me? You got it. It's not all. You've got to understand that these signs have a certain element to them, and you're going to find out, and it's called labor or giving birth, the beginning of birth pains. Now listen to this. He says, such things must happen. Don't be alarmed. When there are wars and there are rumors of war, he says such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, famines, earthquakes in various places. All these are the beginning of birth pains. Giving birth. Anybody out there giving birth? Do you know what it's like? I've watched my wife give birth. Let me tell you something. It's agonizing, but there's a joy in the middle of it. But what I'm saying is, you know, the child is about to be born, so there's pain, there's labor, there's war. And most of you are saying, the devil's attacking me, everything's going wrong, I must be in the wrong place. You may be in the right place. You just may be at the right place. Will you take a different look or have a different view of your circumstance and realize you might be at the right place, at the right time, for the right reason, at the right season? Okay? So, God will give you signs to lead you on the way. As I said, you would be on a road, you're having signs showing you where to go. That's one way of doing it. Now I want to also read something else. It's in John chapter 12. Now I'm going to pull it up here because it's important enough for me to look at and read. But John chapter 12, we're going to talk about something that Jesus himself said in verse 27. Here it is. Let me read. You've heard this before, but I'm just going to bring it up again. The hour has come that the Son of God must be glorified. Now, hear me please. John chapter 12, verse 23. The hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. He didn't say crucified. He said glorified. Now, Jesus is talking the language of heaven. Jesus is talking the language of destiny. He's not saying the time has come for me to be crucified. He says the hour has come. The hour has come for me to be glorified. Now, it's very important that you realize that he is making a statement of what he is feeling in the spirit. What's going on? What's happening is he is saying, I am about to experience something that's taking me closer to my destiny. Now, I'm not going to go through all of it now because we've done this before, but I want you to see again verse 27, what he says of John chapter 12. He says, now my soul is troubled. Hello? He just said that the hour has come for him to be glorified. And then what's the very next thing he says? He says, my soul is troubled. And what shall I say? In other words, what do you want me to say about it? This is the devil? What do you want me to say about the trouble? Lord, please get rid of the trouble. What do you want me to say about the trouble that I'm experiencing now? This is what he says. He says, do you want me to say, Father, save me from this hour? I'm in the hour. I don't want to be saved from this hour. There's chaos. There are things happening right now to Jesus, and he's saying, my soul is troubled. This is Christ saying, my soul is troubled. Immediately after he says, the hour has come. The signs are here for me to be glorified. Something incredible is going to happen. Listen. Next thing he says, my soul is troubled. It's vexed. It's perplexed. Got it? Labor. He says, what do you want me to say? Lord, save me from this hour. I can only imagine how a woman must feel when she is in labor. And she must be saying, Lord, save me from this hour. Now, I don't blame her, because from what I've heard, it is absolutely, unbelievably painful. And men will never experience that. So we don't know, but you can observe it. And I can tell you something now. I'm sure she's saying a lot of things that she doesn't mean. And you know all the things that they say. I was even chased out one of the labor rooms by my wife. So I want you to know something. You say things you don't mean because you're in that time. Are you with me? Jesus says, what do you want me to say? Save me from this hour? I cannot be saved from this hour if I'm going to be glorified, or if I'm going to produce something that's going to change the world. You're paying a price. Now, he says, what do you want me to do? He says, for this purpose, I came to this hour. I'm here for a purpose. But Kim, you don't understand. Don't ever say that. You don't have debt problems. How do you know? How do you know what trouble? You need to understand that everybody's in your position. You may be elevated in a certain place now in terms of evil or bad, but I want to tell you something, we've all been there. And what he says is, I am not going to ask to be saved from this hour. I'm asking the purpose of it. He says, for this purpose I came to this hour, not to be vexed, not to be troubled. For this purpose, he says, there it is. I came to this hour. Father, glorify your name. I just said to you that in the middle of chaos and stress and pain, there are other things going on too. Joy, happiness, peace. All of that's going on. Where is it on the scale? Where is it? If you keep the stress here and joy there, you're in trouble. Jesus says, I ain't going to bow to this. He says, Father, glorify your name, and starts worshiping God. And guess what happens? God speaks from heaven. And Jesus knows he's at the right place, the right time, for the right reason. I think I'm ministering to a lot of you right now. And I hope that I am. But we have to learn. I'm not yet to minister to you. So, let's move on. Synchronicity. Let's talk about synchronicity now. You're my students, and I want you to realize that there's so much more to synchronicity than meets the eye. Synchronicity is the experience of two or more events that are unrelated in cause or purpose. Now, this is the secular, occurring together in a meaningful manner. Synchronicity is the experience of two or more events that are unrelated in cause or purpose, occurring together in a meaningful manner. Now, let's move it to a spiritual. Now, the world says accidental or essential. To count a synchronicity, they say, the event should be unlikely to occur together by chance. Now, hear this out. I agree. From a spiritual perspective, there is no accidental synchronicity, but rather divine providence. Write that down, students. Divine providence, which is God's activity in our world. What is providence? We can talk about providence because you need to understand what providence is so that you can get to your destiny. Providence is, which is God's activity in our world. Wow, Kim, are you saying that He has activity in our world? Oh, don't tell me that. Yes. But Kim, I'm watching CNN. God is involved. Now, you can be feeding yourself a bunch of stuff, which is not right. Doesn't mean God is not involved actively in your world. He is. You just don't see it. And that's what I want to get to you, how you can see it. Let's talk about providence. The word comes from the Latin word providentia or providentia. This means foresight or prudence. Foresight or prudence. Providentia. Foresight, prudence. Now we break it up. Pro means ahead. Prophet is pro. And vedere is to see. Providere is the Latin word providence, and it's ahead to see. That was what the prophetic is, to see ahead. But it means a little more. It's knowledge of the future. So the initial meaning of the word providere, or providere, is to provide. That's what providence means. To provide you with information about the future so that you can take precautionary measures. How can you not know the future? How can God expect you to just wander through life and not know where you're going? So providence comes into play, which is providing you with information about your future so you can take precautionary measures. So that when you know you're going the wrong way, you can take measures. That's what Abraham did when God showed him that the nation that wasn't even yet born would go into bondage and come out with great possessions. He told him that because he knew that Abraham had to know the future. Otherwise, Abraham would be frustrated. He was frustrated. Your only reason for your frustration, one of the only reasons is that you don't have providence in your life. You don't have this provision of the future, or the measurement of, or a greater measure of understanding your future. And so God gets involved with you and He provides the future, or information about the future, so you can take the correct measure, or the correct steps, I should say. Now, what does the word synchronize mean? Synchronize is made up of two words. S-Y-N, which is sin. That means move. It's not sin as in sin. Synchronos is the word. Synchronize is synchronos. Sin means move. Chronos means time. So you are moving in time. You are moving in time. Synchronize means to occur at the same time. Happening at the same time. It means amalgamation, equalize, cohere. Let me give you a story that you'll find interesting. The comic strip character Dennis the Menace, featuring a young boy in a red and black striped shirt, debuted on March the 12th, 1951 in 16 newspapers in the United States. 3 days later, in the United Kingdom, a character called Dennis the Menace, wearing a red and black striped jumper, made his debut in children's comic The Beano. Both creators have denied any connection whatsoever. How about that? You know, when you look at video and you look at audio, if I was speaking to you now and my lips were moving, and I'm sure you've seen this happen before, and the words only come out 2 minutes later, it causes confusion because it's not in sync. So you have to, the video and the audio have to be synced together. So as I'm speaking, you hearing at the same time. That's the same thing, synchronized. Now, Enoch walked with God and was not, because God took him. Let me share with that for a minute, because we need to understand what that means. Because only twice in the Bible was that sentence used, walked with God. Only twice. So it must mean something different to what we understand. Let's hold it there. Enoch walked with God and was not, because God took him. It's an interesting statement if you think about it. So what is it saying? Well, what does the word walked with God mean? And that's what I'm trying to teach you, because when I speak out of Galatians in a while, you're going to understand that when he said walk in the Spirit, it's talking about this same kind of walk. Now, don't be afraid that you was not, or you'll get taken away, because you won't. But it means something else spiritually. Enoch walked with God, was not, because God took him. Now, what does walked with God mean? To walk in perfect rhythm with God. To walk in step with God, to walk in rhythm with God, like this. So you're saying, well, Kim, when all this chaos is happening, I'm not walking in step? No, I'll show you now in a minute. That doesn't mean what. To walk in perfect rhythm with God to the point of amalgamation, to the point of perfect union. So you're synchronized. You're together in time. You and I live in time. God lives in eternity. It's eternity and time and space being one. Do you understand that? Jesus told us to pray that prayer, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven, at the same time. In other words, God joins you in time, and you join Him in time, and you walk with God in perfect rhythm to the point of amalgamation where there's complete, utter synchronization. So you and God are together in time. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that sweet? That on this earth, in our time, limitations, and in our mess, God and I can be one. God took Him. You know what that means? That He became one with God. Now, all of that's important to understand. So to walk with God simply means to live a prophetic lifestyle in constant step with the spirit world. I'll say it again. This is another one that you're going to be tested on. To live a prophetic lifestyle, what does that mean? Getting information from the future. Stay with me. You're listening to a professor, who's teaching you right now. So I'm going to be teaching you from a prophetic perspective. What does walking with God mean? It means to live a prophetic lifestyle, meaning what? You are aware of what's ahead. You are aware of where you're going. You are getting information from the future, providentia. And it is being given to you so you can take precautionary measures if you have to, if you go, of course. That's what it means, to live a prophetic lifestyle in constant step and constant contact with the spirit world, whether good or evil. You are watching and you are aware of evil and good going on all the time. That's what it means to walk with God. Now, because our scientific worldview, I mean, we have many worldviews, but we have a scientific worldview as well. Because our scientific worldview is built on the concept of cause and effect. As a culture, we tend to doubt and deny aspects of experience that aren't measurable and verifiable, but they're undeniable. So often when events coincide in startling ways, the first words we hear or we say are, "Oh, it's just a coincidence." I want to tell you a story about when I went to Perth, Australia. My second visit to Australia. Something that I found so beautiful that happened. I was invited to do a few meetings, and I did a large meeting. But while I was there, just before we did the big meeting, which was going to be in a big auditorium, seats thousands of people, while I was when I was doing my ministry tour, I got interviewed by the Australian newspaper, one of them, and they asked me what I was coming to do in Australia. What was my intentions? And I used this terminology to touch the untouchable and reach the unreachable. And they put that in the newspaper. It was a second page, or no, it was anyway, I can't remember. It was in the newspaper, and of course the newspaper was printed sometime later, a few days later, or the next day. And we were preparing our meeting to go into this large auditorium in the city. And everybody's excited about it. And I was preparing for the meeting, and I knew something big was going to happen. And I said to the Lord, you've sent me here for something really, really big. You've sent me here to do something huge. Who's it going to be? A senator that's going to come to the meeting, or maybe a famous actor, or who? Well, I know there's something big that you've sent me here to do, and I'm here at this time in my life to do something very